A Pan-Africanist joins us for the next conversation. His name is Pidgin Odimwengu. Pidgin is a political party leader. Pidgin was hoping to be elected as president of the Republic in 2022. Something happened. What happened?
Chebukati know it.
So you did not get qualified for the position?
Yeah, basically.
What didn't you present to Chebukati?
He wanted me to give him identification number of Kenyan citizens of almost 50,000 of them.
Right.
Not even number, copy of their IDs.
To prove that you've got following from all those people.
Yeah, which was later on term and constitutional by the court. Yeah.
Okay.
But by that time,
it was already
time.
A bit too late.
Time was gone.
So that was her technical knockout.
Okay. But your aspirations are still alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you believe you could have gotten the 50,000?
Yeah. That wasn't hard for me.
Okay. Yeah. CT, please give Pidgin the day's proverb.
Yes, proverbs. Our proverb for the day from that country which I mentioned, whose capital is Babane. A man who prides himself on his ancestry is like the potato plant. The best part is underground.
Say again.
A man who prides himself on his ancestry is like a potato plant. The best is underground.
Pidgin, what's your interpretation of this?
Oh, it's good that I have some good relations with the people of Eswatini. I think the Secretary General of there's a caucus of workers in Eswatini. It's like a coalition of workers. I met him here. He came over here last year. It's Delamini. Funny thing, the Swatini community is like one family. Delamini family cross over to South Africa and even to Swatini. So it's not even beyond like a one ethnic group. It's more of like a one family. But even within that same one family, you realize that there are people who oppose the king, and there's still also casualties that are being made. So the aspect of the underground, that's what I want to focus on. It's like getting back to the roots. And if you pride yourself on your ancestry, which to me will be on your history, then the best you must do is actually go back to the roots. Check the history, look at the roots. Then on the roots, or at the roots, there is when you can be able to know who you are or your future. Because you cannot actually be proud of your history if you don't go back to the roots of your history. And that's what Marcus Garvey say, that a person without a history is like a tree without roots. So you must actually, and that's for future of Africa, we must actually take our keen concentration on our history. If you actually have to preserve it, because it is the only strength that can give us what you want for this current Africa and even the future. That's what I can say.
Very good. The last time you were here, Pidgin, was in 2022.
Yes.
You were a community leader in Embakasi, right? And you've done a lot in Embakasi, in mobilizing the youth in Embakasi. And then you took this nationally, you were mobilizing nationally. Of course, you took a stab at wanting to be president. Since then, what have you been doing?
I moved a bit to the continent. I've been busy a bit on the continental platforms. One, I'm active in the reparations, especially the reparations for the colonial reparations. Because you see, people find reparations to be more of the slave period reparations. But also the damages that were done in the continent from 84 to 85, 1884 to 1885 deserves reparations, you see. And therefore, I've been in that space actively trying to connect with, of course, helping the bigger team of the Kenya here, Mau team, try to follow up what efforts they have made so far in terms of even their case in 2013 and reparation process. But also, we are also pushing beyond reparation, is about repatriation. Because most of our brothers who left the continent never left willingly. Some people say that some of our kings sold them, but it is never peaceful. It was a fight. You either give in after some struggle. So we never sold our brothers who went to the Caribbean. It was a struggle, and they have a right to be back in Africa. So we've been pushing for reparation and repatriation. Apart from that, we've also been pushing so that we get the archives back, because there are a lot of documents that were stolen from the continent. In fact, within the Commonwealth area, it was close to around 2.5 million files And over so many of them were destroyed in Kenya during what you call the Operation Legacy towards the independence, so that they could hide the evidence. But now we are getting some of them. So that is where I've been active more. But I've also been a co-chair currently of a philosophical class, which is the Kwame Nkrumah philosophy called the consciousism. That is the philosophy for decolonizing Africa with the key intention of liberation, unification, development of Africa. Apart from that, I've been also in the space to try to teach Kiswahili, because I'm also a teacher of Kiswahili. I'm a teacher of history and Swahili. So I've been also giving Swahili lessons freely to the continent so that we can be able to attain the unification of Africa in terms of language. So all this what I do, I connect with the Europe, the UK, the US, and the Caribbean actively in the continent. That's what I've been doing since then.
Are you working in a structured organization? Like, are you a member of a caucus? Are you a member of a group? Are you working for an NGO? When you say we have been pushing, we have been doing that, who's we?
I'm a member of a Global African Congress, which was a global African platform that was formed in Barbados as a platform to push for reparation, restitution, and repatriations of Africans. And then I'm also just a member of the under Kwame Nkrumah Institute of Ideology. There's a group of thinkers or philosophers who have been meeting for the last 10 years to study the philosophy of Kwame Nkrumah. I realize most of books by Kwame Nkrumah were actually banned from many public platforms, especially even after the book of neocolonialism. So basically, I'm not saying that either I work for purely on charity organizations, but those are the spaces I engage in. But I also do a lot of research for purposes of pushing the agenda of unification, because you need to support with data. How is our military number? How is our GDP, our population? How is our welfare of Africa? So that when you push the narrative for unification of Africa, you have data that can convince people that really, if we combine this and this, it's necessary for us to do this. So I've been doing comparative analysis and what's the space in China, India, and the rest of Africa, and trying to check the potential, including the mineral resources exploited from Africa. So all these things have been engaging actively to understand the space of Africa and why we need to push for the unity of Africa.
What would you do with that information when you get it? Because obviously the quest that you're on now is to gather as much information as you can. What would you do with that information? Because obviously the thirst, the desire to be a leader is still within you, regardless of issues. So as you collect this information, what would you do with it?
The basic purpose of this information is to push a narrative and convince people. You see, when you tell Africans that you need to unite, you have to prove why unity and what's the potential you have. For example, when you are checking the report that was released by an organization called War on Wants in 2016, they tried to show us how much companies listed in London Stock Exchange exploit from our mineral resources in Africa, and that was tuning to almost $1.1 trillion. So if you can convince Africans that this is the resources we have as a people, and because we have not pushed for that unification, and because we are not that united, we have exposed the continent too much to exploitation of our resources by the outside the continent, you see, and therefore our unity and preserving our resources can give us this amount. If you look for the military analysis I've been pushing, you realize that Egypt alone has almost 1-point-something military officers or police officers, and you check like US is having 1.8. So if you combine the military force of all Africa, it's close to 10 million, which means if you can have a united military force, then you don't need any other foreign intervention like UN and everything else. So we can have unity of Africa. So these are the information you're trying to push, so that when you're pushing narrative, it's not theoretical narrative. It's narrative that can be supported by data, and data can convince you that if really this is what you have, it's possible for us to attain a continent. That's why I've been deeply in this research and getting these statistics.
I'm actually happy to hear what you're saying. It's a good thing, because anything that has to do with uniting Africans, because our relatives and colleagues in the Caribbean and in the Americas, those are our people. They're actually Africans. Call them African American, call them Afro-Americans. They are still Africans. But how exactly does Africa achieve the unification you're speaking of when we look at our own countries, we are completely fragmented as countries? I mean, you find a unit called a country, and even that country maintaining the whole, maintaining the centerpiece, so that if everybody coalesces together is a problem on this continent. And that's what I'm saying is attested to by the attempted coups, successful coups, and more so the glaring atrocities that we see during election times. So if this is the representation of what happens within our countries, I'm not saying you shouldn't aspire for unification. We should. But then, how then do we get there? Do we continue aspiring for the unification of Africa, or do we focus on trying to see if we can unify our countries first?
Okay, Nkrumah says that, of course, the unity of a territory is very fundamental, because that is the basic. But you must also realize that we are struggling to unite countries who are separated by lines that actually not take into consideration the communities. These Berlin lines actually separated nations. We call them nations, not even ethnic groups or tribes. Africa was made up of nations. And these nations were separated. So some nations you find they overlap in the other side. The others are in this other side, you see? So you realize you have, even in the border of Kenya and Uganda, there's other nations in the other side. In Somalia border, there's other nation in the other side. But the struggle internally of tribes, the so-called tribes now, is actually politically motivated. And this has been used the same way. Of course, Nkrumah said that the Balkanization of Africa is not for the interest of Africa. It was the tactic we call divide and rule. Divide them so that it can be very easy to penetrate. You see, like now, if you have to push for any agenda like now, what you're pushing for this unification of Africa in this position, you see, we still have to rely in these territories, these small countries, the so-called countries, so that they bring a collective voice so that they can support this. And it's very easy for you to stop that because you are divided. Any Western country interested in anything else can come in and jeopardize this process. So locally or internally, I'll tell you that the same tactics is being used. The division of tribes is being used by the political class for their political interest. I'll tell you, after the election like now, there's no any animosity between the tribes. Anybody who is in Kisumu, whether you are a Kikuyu or you are Kalenjin, you'll do your business, you see. But until that time when a politician tap to it, is a card that is being used for success. And maybe this aspect, I think, is lack of ideology in our politics. Then our politics have to be backed by tribes and calling your community. Which you must also realize to the people that none of the tribes have ever benefited actually out of the so-called tribal elections. Because today, it's still the same challenge in terms of cost of living. It's all over. But the so-called the elites, the political class, will unite for their benefit. They will be appointed. But today, there's no community that can say today that they are benefited out of their tribal election or their tribal voting in the last election. So I'll say that tribe or uniting a country is fundamental. But the people we have here are not actually uniting a country because of their interests. Because they know a united country may not give a space for any other policies that's not actually to the people. So that is the challenge we have. And that's why Nkrumah said that if we don't unite, by that time, we might perish. And this is what has been going on. Our division has actually costed us a lot. Yes.
What do you think would bring people together? Most times we see people unify, or unite rather, because they're common issues. The likelihood of you uniting with somebody else is low if there's nothing that you have in common. So what would you think would bring people together for the better good? We're talking about a development agenda that's, much lower than it should be, really fighting or punching below its potential. And there's so many things that are just not going. I mean, the last 2 hours, I had a conversation about why is it not possible to get things running? How do we go past personal desire to make sure that the development agenda, unification agenda, is actually achieved?
You see, as I've said that we must first of all aspire the United Nations of Africa, the unity of nations, before we go to the United States, the so-called states or countries of Africa.
I'm going to stop you there just a minute. The units that are going to come for an overall unification have issues. Can you bring unhealthy, underdeveloped, poorly governed units to come and unite if they still have issues?
Now, that's why I talked of the nations. For example, what is the issue between the Nilotic community of this country and the Bantus? Was the conflicting issue here? But there might be conflicting issues between, for example, Rwanda and Congo, or Kenya and Uganda. And that will extend to the border, resources, and everything else. But if you have to talk today, what is the conflicting issue between the people of Central and people of Nyanza? In terms of the people, the community. There's no conflicting issue. You see? If you talk of the Nilos, whether they are not conflicting. But the countries, the territories where there's conflicting issues, that's what I'll tell you, for example. When you divided a country like, or put a border between the Congo and Rwanda, the key issue is what? The resources are too much in the other side than this other side, and therefore we have to cross over for the resources, you see. And this other side feels that this is our resources because there was a border that was put here, is our resources in Congo, you see. And when the community cross over, because of that boundary, the conflict come in, you see. We are protecting our land. But if you have to remove the so-called artificial boundaries, or in fact they are artificial, if you have to get them out and think of the whole people as they are, it's not very hard. So I'll say the difficulty uniting Africa is if you think in terms of states. Because today, the Somali state claim there's some part that still belongs to them as a country based on the territory. But the Somali people in Somalia and the Somali people in Kenya, or even the Somali people in Somalia and the Kikuyu people in Kenya, what's their conflicting problem? None.
Were there no boundary disputes even before the Berlin Conference between the communities?
You see,
did the Maasai and the Kamba not fight over boundary? Or the Maasai and the Kipsigis? Or the Maasai and the Kisi? Or the Maasai and the Kikuyu? Did they not fight over boundary?
The issue...
Or the Kipsigis and the Luo? Did they not fight?
The issue was the land, not boundaries.
Uh-huh.
You see? And there was this process of expansion, because you realize from our migration point, when you talk of the area, the Bargazel, or the origin, the old Central Africa, you realize when the Arabs invaded Africa, it was actually push. So everybody was trying to push. As you move down, you get a space, you push the next person. You see? It was actually occupation, but it was not based on too much of the boundary issues. It was just for settlement, you see? And when you realize, like when they were practicing now, the modern caste rustling is appearing to be more illegal. But by then it was a practice like a tradition. It was not too much of the war and the conflict, you see? So what I can say is that traditionally, we had kingdoms that were trying to expand, you see? Of course, there were conflict in between the expansion of kingdoms and whatever and everything else. But it was not to this scale, whereby now it's about a line. A line that was drawn by somebody and imposed there, you see? So Africans, of course, challenges might not totally disappear in terms of differences. Even in the house, there's still personal differences between the families, and you still have to survive. But it's easier to manage it if you see yourself as a people than trying to lie or trying to fight over an artificial boundary somewhere. That's the biggest problem that's coming in, you see. And this artificial boundary then has actually hacked as a loophole, you see. For example, I'll give you a clear example. When Africa is now moving to an extent of uniting in African Free Continental Trade Agreement, we are trying to open the market for all Africans to trade. But you see what now happens? One country in the West who do not have access to the whole continental agreement will have to come to a specific country, like for example, maybe Kenya, sign an agreement that you are going to trade with Kenya, maybe from the West, like US and European. Then they set their company here. Once they set their company here, what does it mean? They have access to
the whole of Africa. Yes.
So you see, those small weaknesses we have as different countries is causing us this. And I will tell you, for example, you talked about Eswatini, which is close to 2 million. There are other countries here that are close to almost 1 million. While a province in India is having 200 million people. So you wonder, what's the need of all those so-called countries? Well, it's not viable at all. Because tell me, for example, Eswatini with the 2 million going to sit with China for a business deal, that you are going to have a win-win there. How will the win-win come out? You have a lot of resources without potential to exploit it, but as I said, have the whole potential. They're looking for resources. And these are costs allowed for a period of time. And that's what I'm saying, it's going to be very hard if you still have to continue in this direction. It's very hard for us.
Let's take a break. We'll continue this conversation shortly. Pidgin, you'll also tell us, I've seen you've written a letter to President William Ruto.
The letter is here.
You're to tell somebody about it shortly. Pidgin Odimwengu is a Pan-Africanist. What's the name of the political party again? Sorry.
Accountability and Transparency Party.
Accountability and Transparency Party. He's the party leader. He wanted to be the president in the last election. He's a young man. He's been a community mobilizer in Nairobi, starting from his local community in Embakasi, taking it to the county and to the country. And now he's moving this whole conversation into the entire continent of Africa. 29 minutes past 9. Time for this break. We'll be back shortly. Good morning.
However, you say, I share your concerns that progress towards these goals has been sluggish. The dream of United Nations of Africa remains elusive, and the timeline set for 2063 seems unrealistic. We cannot afford to take another 120 years to unite our continent. Ghana, a staunch proponent of African unity, was even willing to forego its independence for the greater cause of unification. I propose that with strong political will, we can achieve this monumental task within a maximum of 10 years. I equally propose a collective and inclusive approach to achieving this within a realistic time frame. building upon the legacy of visionary Pan-African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, who championed continental unity. For example, in his speech when he talked about our objective is African union now. There is no time to waste. We must unite or perish. Of course, going on to talk about the Balkanization of Africa. You say you acknowledge the qualifications outlined for the AU Commission chairperson. I must express my reservations regarding the requirement of a master's and PhD education. It is my belief that the unification agenda should not be limited to the top elites in our continent, which endanger the union to elitism or reduce its elites to competition. It should embrace diverse paths to excellence. Many of our heads of state, despite their invaluable contributions, do not hold advanced degrees. Africa's literacy levels are evolving and must ensure that leadership positions are accessible to those who possess the necessary skills, experience, and commitment. I'm going to jump. I present myself as a progressive Pan-African, committed to building a stronger, unified Africa. This letter serves as an initial step in engaging with the broader Pan-African community, the AU Youth Council, Pan-African institutions, regional economic blocs, and media outlets. You say the application is not just about myself, but about amplifying the voices of all Africans, especially the progressive Pan-Africans, youth and marginalized communities. Believes in building a collective power through collaboration. So, Your Excellency, I kindly request that the State House of Kenya consider my candidature without discrimination. I seek your support and that of our great nation as I embark on this journey to serve our continent. My commitment to the ideals of Pan-Africanism, the spirits of our founding Pan-Africans, and my unwavering dedication to the AU's vision and mission drive me forward. And you're looking forward to the opportunity to discuss the vision further with him.
So you want to be AU Commission chairperson?
Yes.
So you can drive this agenda.
Yes.
And you say, well, some of these qualifications that have been put there for this position are completely discriminatory, and they therefore just creating this position be an elitist position.
Yes.
Even the people who will be voting for the person who becomes AU Commission chairperson do not meet these qualifications.
Yes.
On education alone.
Yes.
Not many presidents in Africa have a PhD or a master's degree. And yet they'll be voting for somebody and they say that that person must have a PhD and a master's degree, PhD added advantage and all those things. All right. So why do you think that this is the best route for you to achieve this agenda?
You see, there has been actually, I'll say, more of disappointment to some of Africans who feel that the AU has actually not met its goal. And some have even discussing whether we should have an alternative AU, or is it time now to change AU as it was changed from OAU to something else. But I still believe that it has existing structures that if it gets now the progressive people inside, then we can be able to push it. Because it's a matter of, and when I give a time frame like 10 years, it's actually political goodwill. The president the other time just said that we will remove visa. It never took 63 years to remove visa. And if it was to be actually realistic enough, we could not have any visa anywhere. So some of these actually problems you're having just pronouncement. So you can't see how the pronouncement takes over 50 years just to make a pronouncement. So I feel that with the setup of AU, if we can just change and get, in Pan-African space, you have three Pan-Africans. You have the liberal conservatives and progressive Pan-Africans. The progressive Pan-Africans actually look beyond, not their class. And if you can have progressive Pan-Africans inside these, we can drive it where it's supposed to be. Of course, I actually still share my feeling that all those have checked the history of those who have been chairpersons of AU at the end of the day since 2002. Most of them, of course, have that degree and masters. But that has still not made us achieve this. In fact, in their degrees and their masters, they still envision that we can achieve it in 50 years. Which is actually unrealistic to me. So I really feel that there need to be a space so that we talk about the Africa within that setup. Because it was founded from OAU, and you see, by then in 1963, they were so convinced that we could attain unity now.
It was Organization of African
It
Unity.
was even a unity, which was now changed to a union. You see? And actually, they justify that they changed it to a union to now focus on economics and social aspect. But they forgot about the liberation of Africa. And that's why even today, they either call it Africa Day instead of Africa Liberation Day. The liberation is still going on.
One of the things that I've always found interesting when I'm looking at the topic and subject of unification, I look at countries that achieved it. If we're talking about the 19th century, two countries, very huge countries in Europe, were exactly what we are here. Italy, Germany. Little provinces, everybody doing their own thing, kings and princes and all over the place. Now I look at Italy, the gentleman called Garibaldi, a revolutionary a general, was among the people who was key in bringing Italy together until it became a kingdom. Okay? And that happened in 1871. Then you look at Germany. There's a Prussian prince, a duke actually, Otto von Bismarck, did the same thing with Germany. Knocked people's heads together, they came together. Now if I look at the time when they began their quests, when those countries were unified, and then I look at what then became the EU, okay? For Germany, it was 122 years from that point to the time the EU was formed, bringing Europe. For Italy, it was 132 years, meaning a century had to go by, all these attempts at let's unify, let's do this, until eventually. But I mention this because those countries that were unifying as under the EU flag were already unified. There are things they had agreed on. Now, if you look at our own timetable, we must start somewhere, and what you're doing is a good start. What are the steps that we must follow to show that we're actually getting there? I see us struggling with the East African community. It's a good step. But from where you sit, you're the one who's done the research, you've done the thinking. What are these things that we need to see to understand that the unification is getting closer and closer, even if it's just baby steps?
You see, thank you for those good citations, or for those examples. But you also check out the Americans. When they struggled to have the United States of America, it was never United States.
Nope.
It was the Civil War that even actually resulted to the unity. Yep. In fact, they struggled, they fought for their unity.
They did among themselves.
Yeah.
First of all, they fought the British.
Yes. Then
fought the French.
Then they fought for their
unity. Yes. Massacred the native communities, the Native Americans, and then proceeded to fight among themselves.
Now, if you also go to an example of a colonized territory that was colonized like India, even after colonization, they still retain their India. Look at the unity of China. You see? And you see, when you measure our population, we can only measure our population in regards to something like India or China. We cannot measure our population in line with the US, which is around 350 million, you see. So realistically is that since there were two school of thoughts, the Casablanca one and the Monrovia one, during the 1963, there's a school of thought that insisted that we start by unity now. But there's a school of thought that insisted that let's first of all go to countries. Then we now come to regions, then we'll be back to where we are supposed to be. And this was led, of course, with the part of Julius Nyerere, which actually he admits later, over 10 years, that it took him over 10 years to actually understand what Nkrumah meant by us going the one direction. If you check now over the 60 years that we went to countries and even where we are today, you realize that even that so-called unity has not attained actual unity in terms of our peace and stability. Because the key issue for you to unite is your welfare. You're uniting to improve your welfare, to improve your peace and your economic well-being. You don't just unite for the purpose you're uniting and there's nothing you're eating. So unity is actually to preserve your development. Now look at the East African community that has united. How has it advanced the development of East Africa community? You see, now Somalia is coming in and DR Congo are here. And you realize that we're still fighting for the same resources in one side. There's a country interested to get the resources from the other side through some people, you see. And even in this aspect, we have not actually totally liberated ourselves. Because even in Kenya, as we are moving to East African community, we are opening up for Europe, for US with the treaty deals. We are giving our resources like the tallow oil for the other countries, you see. Unity was actually to use whatever you have within your territory, which is below our land. Because the struggle for Africa is what is below our land and above our land. But we have not even used it in our unity. So I don't think that the so-called the regional blockings will actually lead us to all African unity for some time. So you see, the likes of Akan Traore are even now walking out of that regional outfit. They are saying we are out of ECOWAS. So they are clearly meaning that this ECOWAS and this regional bloc are not even meant to lead us towards the total unity of Africa. They're actually just meant to be the cocoons to monitor you and still being used by the West. So that is the biggest problem. So I think that we should not still entertain that the regional bloc will lead us to unity. We should just assume and not assume, even accept that you have to go straight direction. Let's unite.
Into one united Africa.
Straight to it.
Why is it important that we have a united Africa?
Now, the reason why it will be important is that when you have one united Africa, one, you will do away with these wars of the so-called countries fighting, the Berlin Wall wars, the Ambazonia and the Cameroon thing, the Congo thing, you see? When one country want to cross over because of a border. Two, you'll open up Africa for free movement, as we say, free movement of everything else, you see, both goods and people, you see. Three, you can actually decide from the continental level that now the resources of Africa will not continue to be exploited as being exploited through either, let me go talk with the President Ruto, I'll get access to their land, I'll use their oil. You have now to go through a unified common front. And the last thing is that it gives us more bargaining power even as we interact with the rest of the world, you see. When you want to go maybe for EU deal, is Africa with its population going to discuss with EU? You see? Is Africa, its population going to discuss with China? Not all African head of state seated in China to discuss with one country, China, vis-a-vis 55 presidents, you see? Not all Africa are going to maybe US to sit down to discuss with one country. So we actually will get a better advantage in terms of even negotiation with the external world, the continents, in terms of the numbers, the power we have in our numbers. And then we'll have security of our resources.
Is it feasible? Is it feasible to actually have a united Africa, united in all those things that you've talked about? Apart from the fact that we are black, and we have these high levels of melanin, and then we have the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Mediterranean, which puts our laws in one piece of land. What else is going on?
You see,
what is this that would make us feel we are truly united? We are one. Are we?
Few things. Let's start first of all by, even if you have to have one passport or one ID of all Africa as a unification. Like now we are all Kenyans with one ID. You call yourself a Kenyan because you have one ID. You can have one African ID instead of these small IDs. You are one. If you can speak one African language, because even you don't have any way how we can hide our secrets from them, because they have to speak their English. So there's no way I can hide any of my secrets from them, you see. But if you can, all Africa, you move to Tanzania, you move to Ghana, you can speak Swahili and you are together, or Yoruba, all over the African, and you're together. If you can have one same currency, now you have to move there, change it to another thing else, and even change it to dollars, which is not even African thing, backed by our gold, which they don't have there, they have it from here. So you see, all those are the physical characteristics of our unity. Because now, it's very clear. The land and you move all over. You move from here, is another plus whatever, is plus whatever. The currency you move from plus whatever, the ID is plus. It's totally different things. So if you can first of all start by those physical things, before even we move to what they call the total political unity. If we can just abolish all these small things and have one united things, like one document for passport, one document for ID, one language all over the Africa, then that is the progress towards unity. Not one regional block for us, another regional block. It doesn't lead us to anywhere.
I can see the ideal. And the ideal on paper sounds very good. It's doable.
Yes.
But do you see the people of Africa actually getting there?
I don't see the elites of Africa getting there, not the people of Africa.
The people of Africa, the you and I,
you see,
Pidgin Odimwengu and some Pidgin guy who's in West Africa.
I really aspire to go to Ghana and have their passport, or have one African passport in Ghana, speak Swahili with them. And I don't think that being more of a paper thing. It's something that I feel is possible. If today we are to start a program, for example, in language, and teach the whole Africa in the next 10 years Swahili, or even if it's Yoruba, we'll all be speaking one language. You see, even if you start by this younger generation, in the next 20 years, they'll be united. It's not actually not possible. It's something possible. They brought their English, then actually we took away our traditional language, then carried their language. And it became possible for them. You see, we united from our small kingdoms, or whatever called kingdoms and clans, to a country. It was still possible for us, you see. So I don't think that the unification of Africa is still elusive. As I'm saying, the 2063 is actually elusive to me, you see. I don't think that our unity is still elusive. It's possible if we have the political goodwill and if we have the commitment. The only thing that makes it that way is because the majority of people we have, especially those whom we leave to decide this position and these decisions as top leaders, are still not actually looking inward to the African potential, but they aspire even to be in the West. That's why they want to go stay in the West. They have a house somewhere. They want to take their kids somewhere. So they are here tentatively by body, but the spirit is out.
I always hear people talk about speaking this foreign language which we are speaking now as though it's a negative thing. Is it really necessarily a negative thing? In the same way that it is used as a tool for colonization, but are there not advantages we have in being able to speak and understand this language as well?
No, it has played an advantage. It has been able actually now to unite us.
Have we exploited, thank you, have we exploited the advantages that this language affords us as much as we can? Because remember, this is a language that is probably the most spoken on the planet. This one.
It's true.
Okay? So what I'm trying to say is, if you focus on what already unites us, and what we already have and how we can build on it as we look at the other ways of building in on this. See, there's an advantage African countries have if you were colonized in this. very many of your citizens will speak more than one language.
Yes.
Whether they like it or not, they will speak more than one language.
Yes.
In Kenya, you'll probably speak 3. And it's normal. Now, in the West, most of them just speak one language. 1, not even 2. When you speak 2 languages, it's considered a big thing. Now, do you know what that does to your mind? Just the dexterity of moving words and languages in your brain. It actually makes your brain that much better, that much more versatile, that much stronger. So we have many advantages that we lose when we whine and complain about the problems we've had from colonization. As we whine and complain about it, we're entrenching it. Instead of saying, okay, it happened, okay, we've got that one. Now, can we now focus and talk about the very things that you're talking about? But then, see, if you look at me carefully, you will see I'm not young.
Carefully.
Yes. How many people of your generation who, when I look at you, are clearly young, believe what you're saying and support it?
No, that's actually the biggest. That's the biggest space we have here that we must fill. That the all conversations of actually the younger generations have not actually been brought up to this speed. You see, the older generation having experienced that maybe it failed, were not willing enough to pass it to the younger generation based on the experience of his failure. You see, and at the time, that's why I'm saying the younger generation, even when I present my position on this, is a wake-up call to the younger generation to start thinking of how do we move beyond the small party within your community, to think of how do we take over Africa, or how do we unite Africa as a younger generation, you see? Because even when this struggle for climate became more successful, it moved to even a younger generation, see? Somebody is a climate champion in nursery or in class 1, you see? And these are even the reparation struggle. Many young Africans don't even know what is the reparation or why should we have it, you see? But the people who have the information have not passed it. So I come in this space actually to also make it like a wake-up call for the younger people. We need to think beyond this, because the younger people have the potential. You see, this technology and the advancement they've brought to us is actually a tool we must use to unite ourselves, you see. If I have to teach now Swahili, I'm teaching it from English to Swahili, you see. So I still have the advantage of using their language to teach our fellow Africans who don't understand my Swahili, so that they can get the Swahili we unite for the Africa, you see. So we still have to use this. Look at the potential we have in technology. We can unite all over the African, you see. But our younger people are still not in the space of using technology for the purpose of unity. It's technology for show marks, technology for whatever else, technology for something else, you see, without looking inward. Of course, there are so many people who are trying to now bring Afrocentric spacing or Afrocentric thinking in regards even of technology and education and everything else. So the gap is here within the younger generation. And there must be actually serious effort to reach out to these people, you see. Serious effort to reach out to these people. That's what you call Sakara call it political orientation, or the mass awakening. They need to go to the masses. As of course, still Nkrumah said that the revolution must be won by the masses. Until it goes to the masses, it doesn't have any future, you see. So it's the struggle to push it to the masses. But it has remained in the corridors of some boardrooms being discussed somewhere. And that's why the majority of Africans even don't think that it's something that's out there to make any sense to them. And that's the space you're coming in.
I want to go back to the stuff of unification. And I think it is extremely important. We can talk about the need for unification, but I think we need to look at what's happening within those units. In as much as the Balkanization of Africa happened, whereby people who had come from living together in the same space as communities then was separated. Yes. We understand that. However, as a result of that, we saw that these places or these areas which eventually became nation states then had leaders. And the aspiration was to get to a place where development occurred, the livelihoods of people were protected and then sustained over time. Unfortunately, the story for many African nations today is that the development index has remained premature. It has not gone anywhere. In some, it has progressed to a certain extent in others. Can you have a unified continent? Because we're talking about unification of people, we're talking about easy access of trade, we're talking about the opening of borders, we're talking about the livelihoods of people. Can you have one healthy, unified continent if the units are not healthy?
Thank you. Really, as I'd said before, the reason for unity is still for the welfare of the units. You see? But what has made the units not healthy? The leaders are actually from the same units. Mm-hmm. They are not foreigners. Of course, they know white men who are now controlling Africa like presidents. But they use the blacks to control Africa in another way possible. You see? It is very hard. And that's why I say the fundamentals for the unity of Africa still also lies with the people. These units. But if you check, there's possibility of units or so-called communities to develop. There's possibility. It's something that what's like is that I still call it political will. There's possibility. Look at, for example, how much you spent to either MCAs or let me say, for example, the so-called CDF or members of parliament for the last maybe 10 years. How much is it? For only that constituency, if that money was actually targeting to help the people there and being used for the people, for the last 10 years you've been giving a member of parliament around 100 million, could that not actually advance their welfare? So we cannot actually sometimes say that it is very difficult to develop the people. It's the mindset of the leaders who are there. They are not actually using the resources for the benefit of those people. Look, for example, the budgeting we've been doing since 1963. If you count it in terms of trillions, and you still wonder we still don't have roads somewhere, you wonder, do you want to say that it is now impossible that even those trillions could not lead to any development? So we cannot move further to that direction. The reality is that we have the potential. It's just the will that is missing. The will that is missing. Today is 3 trillion or 4 trillion. Count it for 10 years. And you still have people who don't have any shelter anywhere, or don't have any road anywhere, any food anywhere. So how much do we need? But we still have people in the same community who have become billionaires with the same money, who drive and live like, in fact, the Africans who are richer than the West, very richer than the West. So they got the resources where? Here. They got their money where? Here. They use the money, the resources that were here. The West, as I've told you, actually contributed or listed $1.1 trillion from Africa. So you cannot say that we don't have the resources. I'm saying is the political will. And that's what I'm saying is the will of the leaders actually to look at the people and say, let me do this for the people. We have the possibility and the potential to do that. Look at even our counties. How much have we been spending to county budgets for the last 10 years? And you want to tell me still counties are still asking for revenue or still asking for more support. 10 years of helping the counties could be enough for them to be independent. But today, they still don't have it. So I'm saying we have the potential to develop or even to unite. The only thing that is missing is the will. And you wonder why these people are not willing. And the reason is because it's not sometimes to their benefit. Because if you tell maybe, for the example, the rich person, that let's make everybody rich in this village, they'll be like, hey, if everybody's in our way, will I get more wealth? Somebody told me people are rich because some people are poor. And that's how they became rich. So it's that will that's lacking, the progressiveness of thinking beyond yourself to the people. The liberals and the conservatives are too much of ourselves. That's the problem.
How many progressives are there in Africa? Do you think you have sufficient numbers, like a critical mass that can move this conversation forward?
Yeah, we have so many people speaking. We have so many people who think and don't have the ability or the platform to speak of this. They are there. The only thing that is missing is them to be given the platform to start speaking this direction. There are people who meet. Like I'm telling you, my class of philosophy has been meeting for the last 10 years. In fact, I joined them like 3 years ago and I realized these old men have been meeting, the Africans sometimes in the UK, they've been meeting in some hall for the last 10 years discussing the philosophy. And I wonder why do they read one book forever? And it's just because they want to build their thinking and their understanding in terms of whether the idealism position or the materialism position in Africa. And you realize that the problem with Africa is that we were either born idealist or either believe in too much of idealism, spirits and ideas. That's why we could pray there for the rain and the corruption to disappear so that the next day we will see the country now is now governed. We call for prayers for things that are actually not caused by prayers. So we are too much in that side without thinking of our material welfare, our material well-being. And the reason is that when Africans have to be materialists in terms of ideology and think of their material possession, material in terms of matter, what is below our resources, we can get everything else. You see, happiness, everything else, either fulfillment, come from the same thing I call land and the resources we have. But we are out there, I'm not against people praying. We are out there, including a leader who steal, or a leader who loot from you, still pray that God change everything else so that you can have your resources. And the next day, take the same resources that God could have used to help you. So that thinking and that philosophy is what has been lacking. The Africans' unification lacks common ideology and common philosophy.
If even if it's not you, if a progressive became the chairman of the African Union Commission, let's say it's Pidgin Odimwengu or somebody else, do you think that one person would be able to move this conversation?
Yeah, it was.
What do they need?
They need that in-depth awareness, consciousness.
As a person?
Yes, it starts from a person. Sit down, like now we have a conversation here.
So let's say the one person with that awareness, like one of your group,
yes,
actually ascends to that position of AU Commission chairperson. Then
I'll give you a good analogy of that. They say the gospel started with Jesus or the rest. Some of us never saw him, were never with him. But today we defend him. It started with the one person who has the right will and the mind to sit down with those who are there. Everybody can be converted. Some either convert from their tradition to Christianity or to Islam. But if you have a person who can drive the conversation, it's a matter of sharing thinking that can then build the consciousness and say, Nyewe, this is the direction you need to go. But if that person who can start that conversation is lacking there, then everybody there enjoy their normal traditional chit-chats. I think it's not possible. So we need one person to be in that space who have this thinking. Then start sharing those guys. Because I believe through sharing common direction and building consciousness, we can move to a direction. We defend this. And I'll tell you, the gospel and everything else that was started with one missionary. There were not 10 missionaries who came to Africa. It was one missionary who started something somewhere. But today we are all missionaries. By default. Either it's by default. We are all missionaries and evangelists or the defenders of Christ, you see. So it's still possible. The missing point is who is that person and does he have the access to be in that place where he can start the conversation.
This letter by Pidgin Odimwengu that you wrote on the 1st of March.
Yes.
Where is it now? Has it gone
It's been received to status.
Has it been delivered?
Yes, it was delivered and confirmed received. So
it has been stamped received.
No, they told me they'll mark it received.
When?
At the office. No, they marked it received. I went with 2 copies. This is the original copy that was marked received, and the rest remain with the president. And so I'm hoping whether you will want to put it chini ya carpet yake, or you will call me so that you can have a conversation. But I think the candidate also is not President Ruto's candidate.
No, it's not.
It's not a President Ruto's candidate. So I think he should exercise what is due to, or what is needed of him, to call me and let's have a conversation and see how he can also take me to check for those catches the other side they went, so that I can be able to start my own campaign and see if I can reach out to the people, because I need to reach out to the voters.
Okay. And the voters are the other presidents.
Yes, so I need to have that platform.
Okay. Pidgin, all the best. Pidgin Odimwengu is a Pan-Africanist. He is a progressive Pan-Africanist. He's been our guest this morning. Thank you very much for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation. Always a pleasure. See you here tomorrow, God willing. It's 10 a.m.